When money come, me go, yeah. Wetin man go do?
Any
Wetin
other
man go do?
presenters, please
Wetin man go do?
raise a hand
Wetin man go
so
do?
we can add you.
Wetin man go do? Wetin man go do? Wetin man go do? Wetin man go do? God that they serve you,
Presenters, you don't have
no
to
go
keep
let
your
my
video on. We're
blessing
going to
to
go in
pass me.
4 rounds.
Enemy no go laugh me.
The first
Make
round
the
is
money chill
Matthew,
and relax
Carla,
me.
Luce,
If the
and
money
Carolyn.
day, we go fight you. I go beat the life of the party.
So
You go
you can
be
hang
using
out
my
until
magic.
then.
Call me Jasmine, abracadabra. Oh. Waka waka no rest
Speaking of
you.
last people, do we have
Waiting man
Matthew? Is
go do.
Matthew here?
Money
If
go
so,
there
raise a
for
hand,
madam to
Matthew,
cook bono.
or send me a private
Waiting
message
man
or something
go
so I
do.
can turn you on.
Pikin self he gas go school. Waiting man go do. When money come he go yeah. Waiting man go do. Waiting
All
man
right, can
go
somebody
do.
confirm? Are we live? Are we
Waiting man
streaming?
go do.
Are we on the interweb?
Waiting man go do.
Yeah.
Waiting
Yeah,
man
looks like
go do.
it.
Waiting man
Excellent,
go do.
excellent. If you're out there,
Waiting
out in
man go
TV
do.
land or the internet land,
Waiting man
the
go do.
hyper
Waiting
hyperspeed
man go
cables, hit
fight
that share
for.
button. Let's
Waiting
get
man
enough
go
people watching to
fight
meet
for.
our wonderful
Waiting
presenters, our
man go
workshop
fight for
leaders.
business. Man
This is
go
the opportunity for
fight
folks who
for
could not make the conference
nothing. Body don dey
to hear
tire,
from
body
some
no be
folks.
firewood.
We're going to hear
Waiting
questions
man
from our
go
two
do.
hosts and then
Body
also
don dey
questions from our
tire, body no be
participants. It looks like we're coming up
firewood.
over 100
Waiting
people who are
man
still
go
riding strong with us
do.
after a full
Waiting
week.
man go do.
All right.
Waiting man go do. Waiting man go
All right. I think
do.
we're about to get ready to
Waiting
get
man go
started, y'all.
do.
Oh, that was right on time. Hello. All right, folks. Let's see. We're on. Boom. Okay. So we are here for the end of the conference. Just pause for a second and just drop some love in in the chat just for the conference. You know how was it? Let us know in the chat. Overall, how was your experience? All right. I'm hearing fire, fire, fire. So good. Heart emoji, heart emoji, heart emoji. I'm gonna interpret that as love. Wonderful, transformative. Again, love this so much. So amazing, inspiring, such deep learning. Best conference of my teaching career. Fire emojis, multiples. So happy to connect with everybody. Love, amazing. Best conference ever. Heart and mind inspired. Great conversations. Love being with people from around the country. Life giving. Wonderful. My heart and my head are full after this week. Nice, nice. Met all the expectations and beyond. Inspiring. Call to action. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Excellent. All right, folks. So let's finish up. So we had a whole lot of things this week. We had some learning, some keynotes. We'll do a quick little recap here. Boom. We had some keynotes from Dr. Love, a Q&A session with Dr. Kendi, a closing keynote with Dr. Muhammad. We had workshops from these amazing individuals here that we get to hear from in a second. We saw some facilitation and lots of learning experience from our facilitators. So shout out to all of those folks as well. And we had a lot of reflection, a lot of discussion. And we're closing the week out with a Q&A. Thank you for joining us. If you're at home watching or watching live or with us, I'm going to pass the mic in a second to our two hosts. Our two hosts are none other than Manuel Rustin and Jeff Garrett, who are now good friends of mine who are out doing work in this education field and trying to bring awareness to the work that we are trying to do to bring some of this stuff to the light and to give a mic to folks who are doing good work, but maybe we just don't know about them. So I reached out to them to host our workshop closing keynote session. So this gives you a little idea of all the folks that they have interviewed recently and more. Tune in. They have a show that is weekly. They cover the news, education related, and they also feature guest speakers. And I've had the experience of being on their show. It is professional, beautiful, high quality, good content, and good folks too. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Manuel and Jeff. Welcome, brothers.
Well, love that introduction, Joe. Thanks for setting us up nicely. And
Good afternoon, everybody. It is a very serious privilege and an honor to be in the space with you all today. I am unfortunately one of those folks who's had to work all week and has a busy week, so I've only been able to pop in and out to snippets of the week, but it's just been an incredible experience, an incredible journey. And I will say, just to return some of the props, Joe, we first had Joe Truss on the show about a year ago, and it was before it became real cool and popular to talk about anti-racist education. And we got connected with him because he was talking about it when it wasn't cool, because he was talking about it and organizing with folks and building around the need for anti-racist practice and dismantling white supremacy culture in schools when the rest of the country was not with him. And so, Joe, appreciate your continued support for the show and your leadership on this front. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all today.
Much love.
Yeah, I just want to echo all that. Very, very grateful to be in this room with such love and such dope people here, just such dope people. And my name is Manuel Rustin. I'm a high school teacher, high school history teacher in Pasadena, California. And yeah, I've been in the classroom for a very long time, and I'm so excited about the energy that I'm starting to see now with us organizing around this drive to dismantle white supremacy and vanquish it from our schools and build truly liberating, humanizing spaces for our students. So yeah, if you're not familiar with our show, definitely check it out. This morning's keynote with Goldie was super dope, and we had the pleasure of having her on our show a while back. I'm gonna go ahead and drop that link in the chat, and just so you could bookmark it and you know, check it out and all that. But actually, I gotta go copy the link again, Jeff. If you don't mind putting that link to this episode there, appreciate that.
Yep, I got you.
But yeah, we're super excited to get into this Q&A with folks. You know, we've had some of these dope workshop presenters on our show also. So I look forward to seeing them, some of them again. And yeah, we're going to get into it. So we have a few different rounds to just organize it a bit, and definitely let us know if you have a question for them. We ourselves, Jeff and I, have questions for them for sure about some of the work they do, but you know, we're going to try to get as many of your questions in there as possible as well. So as you can see right there is sort of like how we're going to try to organize it, just to, you know, be timely and make sure everybody has space and some time to share a little bit about themselves and their work. So yeah, I think we're ready to get into it.
Yeah, I'm going to go bring on some folks on Spotlight. Matthew, if you are here, let us know and I'll bring you on. Otherwise, we'll get started with Carla, Luz, and Carolyn. Give me a second.
Yep. And for folks who are asking, I've gotten a few messages or questions about the shirts. Oh, there we go. Jeff beat me to it. Yeah, there's the link right there. All right. So two recent guests that we've had, and two super dope, phenomenal educators. We got Dr. Lucia Diaz Herrera in the building, and Carla España in the building. And Carolyn Roberts, I had the pleasure of being in your workshop today. Unfortunately, I had to leave early so I could prepare for this, but super dope and glad to have you here. And how about we start with just given, you know, for folks in the audience who perhaps didn't see your workshop, how about each of you just, you know, introduce yourselves and a little bit about what you did present. Let's try to keep it to like 2 or 3 sentences. What was your workshop about for folks who maybe didn't have the opportunity to see it? How about we start with Carolyn?
Thanks. Huxqual Tanoyap, Carolyn Roberts, Quinansna. My name is Carolyn Roberts. I live in Vancouver, Canada. My workshop was about decolonization and indigenization within the educational system.
All right, Luz, how about you?
Hi, Luz Ravira Herrera. I'm an assistant professor of bilingual education at CSU Channel Islands. I'm coming to you from LA, and I had the pleasure of co-leading a workshop with my hermana en la lucha, Dr. Carla España, and our workshop was on counter-narratives. And we looked at counter-narratives in picture books, middle grade, YA lit, poetry, across social movements. So we had a lot of fun.
Dope.
Carla España, and yeah, it was a pleasure to present with Luz, and I am in a teacher preparation program in New York, as well as a middle grade educator and dean of grades 7 and 8.
All right, wonderful. Well, great to be in the space with you today. And something that we heard a bunch about this week, and I think it's probably on the mind of most educators who care about the issues that brought this group together this week is nationwide. I think we're up to 21 states that have passed or are in the attempt of passing laws that are restricting the teaching of or discussion of really truthful perspective on issues of race in the curriculum and in classroom instruction. And each of you have taught and supported others in teaching what some might call, sort of dangerous curriculum, right? Dangerous to the master narrative, if you will. And that may be even more so dangerous in this new political context. So we're wondering how you advise educators on staying the course in the face of this controversy, or perhaps even in the face of laws that push against their efforts. And maybe, Carolyn, we can start with you.
Thank you. So part of my work and what I do is I educate pre-service teachers before they get out into the school system. I'm a faculty lecturer at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. So what I try to instill in our students, and my hopes are, we had a prime minister here in Canada that believed that Canada had no history of colonialism. And so I want to instill in these educators that you are going to have the next government people that you are have in your classrooms. You are teaching them, what do you want our next prime minister to know in our future generations, so that we can start changing the single-sided colonial narrative of what this place came to be and how this place came to be what it is today. So because of that, you hold the opportunity to change this narrative, to make sure that all sides of the story are being told within our systems, and not just the single-sided colonial European Western white view.
Powerful. I appreciate that. Just the thought of the Prime Minister of Canada not believing in any colonial history is, it's taken me a minute to wrap my mind around that, Carolyn.
It's trash, man. It's trash.
Yeah.
That's all what it is. Trash,
Yeah.
it's racist, all that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. So then how do we change that narrative if the people in the government systems don't even understand how they got to be where they are? We can't change a system that they don't believe is even there. Right.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
Yeah. Luz, I see you came off mute. What are your thoughts about this issue?
Yeah, so thank you, Carolyn, for starting us off with that. And similarly, I teach pre-service teachers. And so one of the things that we have to think about, well, we have to first look around. Who are we teaching? Where are we teaching? We have to know the socio-political landscape of where we're going to be teaching. And it's impossible to ignore the different factors, right? The different just contexts that are continuously shaping the experiences of the kids in the communities that we'll be teaching or are teaching. And so we cannot ignore that. And I think one of the main messages that I give to my pre-service teachers is like, okay, let's look at all of historically, right? Let's look at all of the different ways that schooling has perpetuated this oppression, racism. How are we going to disrupt this, right? How are we going to organize ourselves and be the disruptors? And it's going to have to start with us, with them, right? So that's one of the major messages that I like to bring into my teaching and into the workshops, into any of the work, all of the work that we do together with Carla as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Luz and Carolyn. I think I'll add to that. I have two kind of people that are in my mind when you raise that question. One is a teacher in the South Bronx who texted me about 2 weeks ago and saying that they need to chat. We got to connect in tears because they're on their own. It's like they're really heading this work on their own in their school. How do we keep going? Which is like your question, right? And so a lot of my conversations with this teacher, who's also a really good friend, and our conversations that we've had with teachers in our workshops and today has been that you're not alone. You have to connect with community in order for this work to be sustainable. So whether it's my, Afro-Latina teacher in the Bronx who feels alone, like we got to connect with which communities are giving you the support. And then there's the other case of like the very frightened white teacher in a different kind of school in a different part of New York who feels like families are not going to understand their decision to, I was like going to grab one of the books, but the decision to select a text that presents a different narrative that's more humanizing on the stories of the impact of immigration and justice on children. And so my work with that teacher and that team is about supporting them with how do you involve the counselor, the principal, the English department chair, the librarian, like everybody is going to be reading and discussing these books so that we're in it with you as a language arts teacher, and you don't feel alone in teaching these texts because you don't know what's going to come at you. So that's my big conversation with teachers has been like, we need more support and community.
Yeah, strength in numbers is critical, I think, in this context for sure. Especially, you know, I know we have some folks in attendance who might be the one person from their school or their district or their particular context who are, you know, really out front of this issue. But finding like-minded folks and finding allies in the struggle is critical. Before we ask a follow-up question, also just want to flag for everybody in the audience, feel free to drop questions that you have for our speakers into the chat. And we're going to be monitoring the chat there. And I believe Joe is going to ask folks to come off of mute to ask your question if you are so moved. Otherwise, we can ask it for you. But Manuel, why don't I kick it to you for the next question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so folks, definitely let us know what questions you have. I'm going to drop the link again for Luz and Carla on our recent episode about centering bilingual Latinx students' voices and experiences in the classroom. And we hope one day, hopefully soon, to have Carolyn on our show as well to discuss how we could do better by not just our Indigenous students, but do better by like fighting against that master narrative that totally erases Indigenous cultures and histories from our nation and our existence. So yeah, I guess a question that I have for y'all three. So you've definitely helped us think about how we can just remember the importance of creating these humanizing, liberating spaces for our students and really fighting back against those oppressive narratives. And we're trying to do this in the midst of a global pandemic as well. And most educators are either now in their summer break or about to be in their summer break, and then before you know it, it's going to be fall. So we're wondering in terms of, you know, quote unquote, reimagining what schools should look like, in terms of how we do right by students this fall as they navigate the complexities of the pandemic and plus all the other challenges that we face. Like, what ideas or what thoughts do you have about what educators and schools should be prioritizing this fall as students return back to their schools? I'm gonna toss it to somebody. I know you're all thinking about it. Carla's like, not me. She's
like, who's gonna go? I can start. I'll start us off.
We're going to Carla first. Carla, what do you think?
So I think Dr. Gholdy Muhammad talked about this in the wonderful keynote this morning about how you know, the really flawed narrative around learning loss. And even before the pandemic, and then Dr. Gholdy Muhammad was talking about joy loss and how even before the pandemic, like, education has been working for so many populations, specifically our Black, Indigenous, children of color. And I think one of my big takeaways in conversations with teachers has been the importance of supporting students' mental health and just overall well-being, and keeping in mind Dr. Gholdy Muhammad's thread of joy, part of that culturally and historically responsive framework, right? And so I think that's been a big point of conversation in our planning is who is involved, who's at the table to make decisions about maybe decisions around classes that are being taken, scheduling, like everything around the whole institution of schooling. Is it really for the whole child? Are we honoring their full humanity, or is it for the sake of an adult because this is what worked for them when they were in school? So I hope we don't go back to how things were before, because it wasn't working before. And so that's one of our big takeaways, is really thinking about the full child and their health.
Yeah, thanks, Carla. Such a critical point. We were thrust into this moment in time where we had to automatically change how we're doing what we're doing. And I think that if we were asked, oh, could you do this? And well, yeah, right. But because we were pushed into that moment, we can now reimagine what school looks like and what school feels like for all the students. And who does it privilege for you, exactly what you're talking about? Who does it privilege for those who are allowed to come in and can come into the space easily? But what about those other families and those other communities that don't have that same kind of luxury of just being able, like we're talking about at a university level, right? The families that live all together, and we don't have all the vaccines yet here in Canada. So how does it, how are we honoring those who can't come in? And if you can't come face to face, you can't come. Who does that privilege, and who is at that table to talk about how we are going to nurture and care socially and emotionally people who have been in quarantine for a year, right? How do we nurture and care for those little humans? Yeah, so many good points.
I mean, thank you, Carla and Carolyn. I mean, I think that, yes, we have to definitely think about, well, how do we then start from a place of community? How do we create community? I think about my son all the time. He's a first grader going into second grade, and how for the longest, it was just me and him, and there was very little to no interaction with other children, and think about how that also has impacted him. But start with community building. Start with the ways that we can connect with each other. The children can connect with each other, and then just go from there.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question here, and we got one in the chat, so maybe we can take that as our final question. Actually,
all right, throw a hand up, Carolyn.
Yes, please.
So I can find you and bring you on. Can you raise a hand? Oh, there you go. Boom.
I don't know where's my hand. No.
Oh, it's another Carolyn who asked.
Hi,
it's this Carolyn. I loved your workshop, other Carolyn. I listening to this conversation, especially with counter storytelling and counter narratives. I don't know if you all have seen the stuff being talked about with the recent release of In the Heights movie. I was a big fan of In the Heights when I watched it on Broadway, and the casting of the recent movie has brought up a lot of conversations, and I put in the chat because it really bothered me. But I recently read a critic's review that had me fuming, because he said one of the reasons it stumbled at the box office was diversity only matters for movies audiences already want to see. And I just was like, oh my gosh. So my question is, how do we find the space and balance where we are sharing stories and being critical at the same time with the stories that we're sharing with students without people shutting down? I see the colorism in the Heights, but I also don't want movies like that to stop being made, if that makes sense. Because I think we need to continue the storytelling and disruption of the singular narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
You go ahead, Carla.
Oh no, I was going to say thank you for raising that. It came up in our session. We were talking about it. I explicitly selected text in order to bring up this topic. And so I'll say that a conversation we've been having, because this is not just in the film and representation in film, but it's also in books, it's in education, right? So this is a bigger problem that we have. As a teacher who taught in students who are Dominican in this area, this really hits close to home. And so I'll say that the decision that I decided to make, and I can't wait to be more conversations with teachers about this, is to see who has the power to decide which stories we're making room for. And how are we using our voices to highlight our voice and our power to highlight those stories and representation? So when it comes to the film itself, I think it's really important for me, it's just been to highlight the voices of our Black, Latinx, Black, Latina writers and journalists who are talking about this. As a white Latina, that's not my experience. I need to listen to their expertise because they're not being represented, and I want to highlight their voices. And so when I look at the parallel in my teaching life, that's what we talked about today in our session. I was like, is that also something that's happening in our representation with text? Because like, oh, we want, or kind of like the Rita Moreno line. There was like, oh, but we all come in different colors. Just like, why can't they just wait? Like, why can't they just wait? Actually, I don't want to wait. Like, I want to bring my Elizabeth Acevedo text and pair it with other poems that talk about Black identity and Black Latinx identity. And I'm going to use my power as a classroom teacher and in order to highlight those voices. So that's just me and with my teacher hat, but also my, living in New York, taking this movie in. So that's all I'll say about that.
I did get a private message from Pamela, so I don't know if we have enough time to squeeze in one more question, or
I think so.
Yeah. So Pamela,
let's bring in.
Well, actually, I had two, and we would have to choose. Maybe I'll choose the one that I just sent. That had to do with a video that came out with a Black father and daughter, heartwarming as can be, but the father and the daughter are articulating the problem that they have with CRT. And the reason that it's so extra distressing is because it comes across as so heartwarming. The father is, saying that this is not, and I mean, he's a brother, just like, my nephew, my sons, etc. But and his daughter, who maybe 6 or so, is saying, and yes, we should not do things that will be divisive, and critical race theory would be divisive. So I'm just saying that is something that, we would want to offer for critical response that is constructive. But this is something that groups that want an excuse not to do, to understand the value of critical race theory, how they could use a depiction like this. And so that was one of my concerns. And the other one was, if we were looking at 2030 and we were thinking about reconstructing how we do resource distribution and budgeting for anti-racist education to be sustained, how would we put our heads together to reprioritize, to transform the way that we think about budgeting and or resource allocation? So it's a mouthful. It's 5:30, 6 o'clock here. I don't know what we can do with any of those, but
either of you three like to take a shot at responding to either one of those questions before we invite our next round of workshop presenters in?
I mean, I'm looking at Ken's response, right? I mean, anything that is challenging this dominant narrative is going to be considered divisive. And so, and they use our own to kind of, to push this narrative. So it's very frustrating. It's constantly having to defend ourselves, our humanity, having to assert it. And it's just so exhausting. And it's just apparently going to continue forever. I don't know. It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
They're challenging ourselves to stay present in the face of inevitable misrepresentations of what the work is.
Yep. Yeah, if I might jump in on that one as well, Pamela, because Lucy really making me think, from the beginning of America, divide and conquer has been the foremost strategy used to advance an agenda of oppression. And that has always included, using our own against us, or using token members of communities to undermine the legitimacy of the rest of the community. And it is both important to be clear about what is happening and who those folks are, and be, conscious to what's happening, but also important to not be but so distracted by their recklessness, right? That ultimately our job isn't to debate them all day. It is to organize and advance, in the name of justice, that the work that we know needs to be done.
Thank you. And I think I'll also be using what I learned in the critical dialogue sessions that I had the benefit of attending this week, and see how I can use what I learned from that to kind of model the way that we can have these dialogues to represent those perspectives that you all just tried to help me bring forth.
Most
Beautiful,
definitely. Thank
beautiful.
you for the
Thank you
question.
so much. Yeah, thanks everyone. Can we give some love to our first round of
Thank you.
presenters? I'm gonna start bringing on our second round.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. All right, give me 1 second. We'll start moving people along. Thank you so much. All right, and maybe you can bring folks on. I want to introduce each person. Let's have each person just say their name real quick as they come on. Welcome, Art. Tell us who you are, Art, while we're bringing each person on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Art Nelson, Concordia, coming to you from Chumash land, occupied Chumash land in 805.
Hello, everyone. Nicole Henderson, here in San Francisco Bay Area.
Hey, everybody. Dr. Sosten Jaber from Illinois.
And our last person, here we
go. Amy Richel, she, her, hers, from San Francisco.
Right. Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. It is a pleasure to meet you all virtually here in this wonderful space on a Friday after a week of incredible learning and discussion. And probably the toughest question we're going to ask you is this one right here, which is for the folks who didn't have the great privilege of being in your session this week, we're wondering if you can just give a very quick, just couple sentence summary of what you presented on today, just so folks have the context of who's in the room. And I'm going to call on Sosten. Maybe you can go first.
Sure. So my session was about how we can bring students to the table for social action and really think about them as activist scholars as well. It was kind of answering the question, what can we do with students instead of constantly saying, what can we do for them?
Great. Nicole, why don't you go next?
Thank you. I hosted a workshop on reducing racial disproportionality in special education. And we had an opportunity to explore some of the research and investigate trends and consider implications for policy change around the topic. We also looked at some of our own narratives and counter narratives that exist when identifying students for special education, and then started into some action planning around policies that we can shift from our own locus of control.
Beautiful. Art Nelson, why don't we invite you to go next?
So Amy and I got to co-host our workshop with Amy Richel, and we basically gave participants an update in terms of where the reaction is coming from, the opposition is coming from to ethnic studies, really try to tie that to the larger reaction to CRT and 1619 and Zinn Project, first part. And then the second part, we really wanted to define ethnic studies on our terms, and for the participants who may not quite know what it is. And then we guided them through some critical self-reflection grounded in history, systems, and power.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Amy, certainly will hold some space if you'd like to add to that description as well.
Thank you. I am holding space also for my 2.5-year-old son. So I think Art also spoke very well, and I appreciate him speaking for me. That's all that I had to add. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, if we have learned anything in the last 1.5 years, it's that life happens while we are on Zoom. So we feel you and appreciate you doing what you can to join the conversation today. Manuel's going to kick it off with our first question.
Sure. So yeah, thank you all for taking time to be here for this Q&A. And so we know the traditional thought about how teachers are supposed to be is that the teachers are the experts and students are supposed to passively sit there and learn and memorize the knowledge coming on down from the teachers. And we know that none of y'all are with that old oppressive mindset of what teaching looks like. And folks who are here in our audience have just been through a week of a conference to learn the various ways and methods for dismantling white supremacy. So I guess we'll start with the question. When it comes to centering students and student voice and student interest, what role does that play in the effort to create truly anti-racist curriculum and anti-racist schooling in our education system? And I think we're going to go with Dr. Gibber first.
So I think I've said it like a million times this week, like in every conversation that I've had, I'm not about cookie cutter anything, not about cookie cutter equity work, cookie cutter curriculum, cookie cutter anything. I believe really that we have to look at the demographics of the students in our building. We have to look at demographics of teachers in our building. We have to look at where they are in their different journeys, their different experiences. We have to look at who they are as people. There's so many different factors that create that chemistry about deciding what works with a group of students and what doesn't. And I'm a big advocate for using the first 2 weeks of school to really just get to know your students on a very deep level, like Dr. Zaretta Hammond says, beyond the shallow, and really like deep into digging in and finding out who they are, and then making a determination about what works and what doesn't, and constantly being flexible. I learn from my students every single day. And I think that mindset walking into the room is very important, because I know that I'm walking in there as a learner. I know that I'm walking in there to benefit from their experiences and to share my own. And I model those things in my classroom every day. So like I told my the participants that came to my session, when they journal, I journal. And when they share, I share. And when they create story maps and identity charts, I do the same. And it's really important for a bunch of different reasons. For me personally, it's a way for me to also represent a demographic of people who aren't normally in positions like the one I'm in, and speak on things that we don't normally speak about. So even if I'm not represented in my student body, I'm dismantling stereotypes and barriers that people see when they look at me, right? I've been called a terrorist by teachers, by students, by parents. And so just really having those conversations on a deeper level and showing them that I love them and I care for them by itself, doing my job and doing it with fidelity, I'm already dismantling those stereotypes, and putting myself at the same level of students as a learner gives me the opportunity to learn from them and them to learn from me at the same time.
Well, right on. Art, what do you think about the role of centering students and their voice and their interest in this equity work, this anti-racism work?
Yeah. Lots going on in here that I think are reflective of ethnic studies practitioners in general. I think it's really important to say that we don't tell our students what to think, but it's important for us to point them toward what to think about, if that makes any sense. And in ethnic studies, it's really a conceptual approach where any young person in front of us can grapple with concepts on their own terms. For example, we, like Dr. Gibbert was talking about, how she starts a class. We start our first unit with identity and narrative. And any young person in front of us can answer, and we guide our young people to answer the question, who are you, from where do you come, how did you get here, and where are you going? What is your purpose? And it's twofold. One, we're guiding them toward some reflection about their lived experience. And then as ethnic studies teachers, we're layering and helping them, equip them with language to identify what's going on and help explain the reasons for why things are happening. And so I think, of course, it is beginning with the student lived experiences and then building off of that. And I think that is central to ethnic studies, is centering the students' lived experiences, particularly our young people of color, our Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And it is intersectional, absolutely intersectional, because it is not just race that we're talking about here in terms of inequities and injustice. We're talking about sexuality, gender, class, ability. So central to our practice, and it's something that our teachers, right, have to do for themselves as well. Some deep reflection anchored to history, politics, systems, and power. But I know Ms. Ritchell, Amy has something to say about that as well.
Thank you. I also want to say two things. One is that ethnic studies is truly community responsive, right? And so what that means is that you are responding to not just the the identities of the communities that you serve in your school, but the ones that you serve in each class that you're teaching, right? So in other words, like that, like you're centering students' wants and needs who are in your classroom in like first period or second period, right? That you're constantly adjusting for the excitement and the context in which you're teaching, you know, which really makes things so much more alive and so fun, you know, that that you're really kind of throwing your lesson plan away sometimes to be like, oh, okay, well, this is what my first period needs. And my second period actually needs something a little bit different, you know? And like as a teacher, I think when I first started teaching, that was very scary. But then I found that it was so much more liberating because then your students are engaged, you know? You don't have to force engagement, you know, like for kids who are actually saying something to you, you know, because our kids are constantly telling us stuff, you know, like if they're resisting the lesson plan, why is it that we're continuing with it, you know? And the other thing is that starting with, sorry, I'm losing breath because I'm also holding this little human who's clearly telling me something, but you know, like that starting with ourselves and such a beautiful point about the assignments that we're asking our students to do. Like we have to engage in that too, you know, like being vulnerable with our students about our own identities and how they change over time is just such, I think, something that we all, again, like we need to push ourselves to do.
I think same question.
It's up to you.
Yeah, I'll take this one on, especially when I'm thinking from the lens of a special education or education specialist and resource specialist. And oftentimes when students are being identified for services, because in elementary school, which is my area of expertise, it's at such a young age, there are so many adults making decisions for that child. And when we talk about that disproportionality, that racial disproportionality, there are so many adults that don't look like young boys of color, young girls of color making decisions for that child and not asking that child what their needs are. And then that continues to get perpetuated once they become identified for emotional disturbances, other health impairments. They're responding to what's happening to them because nobody asked them what their needs were. And so I think that it's crucial to center children in all aspects of education, but particularly in special education, if we're really thinking about reducing that racial disproportionality. And even for students who are identified in my workshop, I shared a case study where even as a Black educator, right, I still have work to do. I still have to think about how my responses might be perpetuating white supremacist culture and not dismantling it in the moment when in my mind and in my teacher training and in the research and evidence-based practices that I'm supposed to put forward, there's still this power struggle because I'm the authority and I'm the adult and I want them to listen, and I'm not centering and asking what their needs are in that moment. And then I also have the ability to look at the disciplinary actions because of this interaction with the student and say, oh, he was being non-compliant. Oh, he was being defiant. Oh, he was being aggressive. All of that is subjectivity when the conversation doesn't center the child. And so I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah. So many profound thoughts there. And folks, if you didn't see in the chat, definitely now is the time to add any questions and raise a hand if you have a question you'd like to engage with our panel about. And Nicole, as you were talking there, and really all of you, as you were talking, you made me think of something I've heard from Bettina Love, and I think she was drawing actually upon Audre Lorde when she said this, and I'm gonna not get it 100% correct, but basically that the work of anti-racist education, abolitionist teaching is to address that piece of the oppressor that lives inside each of us, right? And that can be a hard thing to grapple with as a person who, you know, has spent most of my adult life working to overcome those kinds of things, but we operate within these systems, and so that consistent practice of self-examination is is so critical. So critical. Well, our second question for you all is Manuel's first question was kind of about students and student voice. This one's really about teacher leadership and teacher voice. And in a situation where we have so much controversy around the teaching of ethnic studies and challenging some of the dominant curriculum, teacher leadership, I think, is called for perhaps in ways that it may not be in other contexts. What role, in your mind, does teacher leadership play in creating and sustaining these humanizing, anti-racist spaces for young people in schools? And maybe Art Nelson, we can start with you.
I think we really do, as critical educators, need to embrace the activist aspect of our position. And I think oftentimes we down talk ourselves too much. Oh, I'm just a teacher. Oh, these administrators are going to do this and that. And I really understand that context matters, because in San Francisco, it is, I think, very different than what it is in Santa Barbara, where teacher power and how it's wielded and what it's facing is dramatically different. So I get how many of our teachers basically are scared to say something or to do something. But I think if we can look at what UTLA has done, or elements, teacher activists within UTLA and UESF in San Francisco, about really taking a principled stand in relation to supporting the people, the Palestinian people and their struggle for self-determination and human rights in relation to Israel, like that required an incredibly courageous commitment. And I think that happens because of the relationships that they have with each other in terms of building teacher power. And that's one example. And it's an incredibly supercharged fight. And yet we have to decide to do these things. And I think you start teacher by teacher, you start with your immediate site, and you start to create as much space as possible. And we do need to engage with our site administrators. There's a great deal of power at the site level. And then we have to be in constant conversation with our colleagues at other sites. And we are taking an organizing stance. We are identifying friends and allies and supporters. And then we are identifying those opposed to us. And there's this giant group of folks in the middle. And we need to, one by one, build relationships and then do the education. And there is no other way around it. We have to build teacher power. That's connected and accountable to community. Sorry, that's the other piece. We should never operate in isolation, just as teachers.
I think that was going to be my additional point on that piece. I think that mentorship is so important, like real, true anti-racist mentorship, and how to actually build that culture within your school site, but also, like Art said, to other school sites as well. And that's across departments, right? Like I teach history, social studies, and being strategic with how we also support math folks, and how we actually are strategic on which teachers to kind of target and support, and how we actually bring the community into that like holistic approach as well, and to make something that's actually lasting after individual teachers leave.
We got another member of the panel who wants to weigh in, a budding anti-racist practitioner. Sosin, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, I mean, in the words of Dr. Love, right? Strategize, organize, protest. I think it's time that we leverage our unions. We leverage like nationally, not even just locally in your own school. I've worked in schools where there was a 600% of growth of population of kids who look like me. And I was the first Middle Eastern teacher, the first brown teacher, even our Spanish teachers were white, who was hired in a district of 500 employees. And the only reason I got the position was because it was an FMLA leave. I just moved to the area and they needed to fill the position quickly. I know that I was not their first choice or their choice, period. And so I represented the students demographically, and in that space, I tried to advocate for the students, but I was definitely the angry brown person in the building or in the district, labeled that and treated accordingly. So I think, but even in that context, we had allies and we had co-conspirators who were willing to work, but there was that kind of that fear factor that is also the design of the oppressor, like these silos are. So I really think that the only way to break the system is to infiltrate those barriers and those silos that have been created, and to really put our hands together and work together. And that's on leveraging every body or organization that exists currently and creating other ones if they're not working for us, to really work together and collaborate to make that difference and that change. And Art, thank you for bringing up Palestine. I always appreciate that. It makes my heart warm to hear people talking about it because it's being erased. So thank you.
Nicole, would you like to have the final word on this one?
Yeah, just real quick, I would agree with all of the other panelists, and would only add, if you're feeling powerless, take your power back, right? I think we have to remember as teachers, we're a hot commodity nationwide, right? It might not feel like that all the time, but take your power back. And if you're in a position or a space where you feel powerless, put yourself in a position where you feel like you can organize with your community to assert your power forward. And remember, the same agency that we're talking about giving to students, we have to hold that agency for ourselves. So I'll leave it with that.
Beautiful, wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us in this discussion today. So many powerful ideas shared, and not only in this space, but in your workshops throughout the week. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to start bringing in the next round. Thank you so much, workshop presenters. All right, and I'll start bringing in our first person here. And as I bring you in, feel free to just say your name and where you are and what you do, and we'll start everything up.
What's up, everybody? I'm Ken Shelton. I'm based here in Southern California, in Los Angeles, and it's really inspiring to look at my Zoom. This is not a normal picture for me when it comes to, well, really, it's not a normal picture for me when it comes to Zoom or when I'm on stage at major conferences. So, Joe, what else was I supposed to share? I'm still like.
That's it, man. That's it.
Oh yeah, this is. I got a screenshot, and you know what? I got a screenshot, and I'm gonna save it for. Which unfortunately happens more often than I would like. I'm gonna save it for those days. And actually, I think all of you should consider doing it. I'm gonna save it for those days where I feel like I'm ready to give up, or I feel like I don't have the energy or anything like that. And I'm gonna pull up the picture and be like, okay. So for those of you that were in my session, remember I talked about the whole feelings of isolation. This is an example of where you can say, okay, here's my visual affirmation that I'm not alone.
Beautiful. Well, Ken, just so you know, Manuel and I are both here in Southern California as well. So, you know, we can organize together at some point if need be.
We were just started with some quick intros. Alcine, then Matt, and then Mike, and then I'll let you brothers take away with the questions.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Alcine Mumby. I am in Georgia right now, formerly Muskogee land. They were forcibly removed, unceded territory. And are we talking about our workshops too, Joe, or no? Or no?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and start there? We were asking everyone to just do kind of a 2-sentence, what did you present on this week for the benefit of folks who weren't in your session?
Great. So I approach, my session was healing from white supremacy culture. And it was really from a somatic space where we did not center white supremacy or white supremacy culture. It was only for educators of color, and we accessed our resources. And I lean on Resmaa Menakem's concept that we are well resourced already. Think of the caterpillar and the butterfly and all the parts in the caterpillar is contained in, you know, the parts of the butterfly contained in the caterpillar. And so we just kind of have to move some of the goo out the way to access what is already there. And so we did some healing practices. We leaned into some Ho'oponopono. We leaned into some Kintsugi as a theory, as a example, and we did some talking and some guided visualization where we met with our future liberated selves and then moved from there.
All right, thank you. Michael, why don't we, oh, I'm sorry, Matthew.
No, Matt
Go
was
ahead.
next.
Yep.
Hey everybody, my name is Matt Kay. I teach 9th and 10th graders English at Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia. I've been there about 15 years. I led a session on how to lead race conversations in the classroom with our students, like on the ground, like what happens, with the decisions we make, the consequences of those decisions. We looked at a lot of videos and we just try to kick some ideas around. And so that's what we did, and it was fantastic. So thank you for everyone who came to the sessions. We really, really got after it. It was fantastic.
My name is Michael Essien. Currently, I am a principal of a middle school here in the southeast section of San Francisco. I reside in the Bay Area, but I'm K-12 LA Unified, and go Bears, Shelton. Just want to send that shout out there. I also have Essien Education Group, which is an education consulting group that works with districts, administrators, and teachers, leadership teams around transforming schools to be anti-racist, to get different outcomes, and to humanize all those within the system, students, parents, teachers, as well as administrators, because they're all suffering under the system. My workshop was anti-racist discipline. You are the one students have been waiting for. In our conversations, more times than not, we keep talking about the boogeyman, the systems out there. And yes, the system is real, but we did an exploration around the system being the collective thoughts of adults in the building as they use their personal values and beliefs to apply rules, policies, and procedures to interpreting student behavior. So we were talking about you, like not the boogeyman out there, you. And so we were able to explore some ways to get student voice involved at the teacher level in the classroom, at the level that the kid is sent out, how to do restorative practices in the main office, counseling office, whatever the case may be, and how to support administrators thinking about incorporating student voice at the systems level. Because the issue for me is around the systemic racism, not the individual racism. The systemic is how our kids are being killed, and that's being killed by us, not the one random white person who's saying some crazy stuff.
Indeed. And Ken, do you want to chime back in with just a couple sentences about what your session was on this week?
Yes, I apologize for not before. So I did a session. It was titled "Examining Bias and Racism in Media and Technology." What we essentially did was we level set the use of terminology. So we covered implicit bias, microaggressions, profiling, centering, stereotype threats, and I'm drawing a blank. I always forget the sixth one. But anyway, we looked at that. And then we kind of went through how the technology that you all use, first of all, algorithms are not innocent. They are written by humans, code, okay? And how, and I'll borrow the quote from Kathy O'Neill, algorithms are opinions embedded in code, and how all of the things that we associate around all of those areas, profiling, centering, microaggressions, stereotype threats, and implicit bias are reinforced in not only the technology that we consume. By the way, AI is not your friend. Let me just throw it out there now. But also the media that we consume, where we analyze everything from print media to commercials. I talked a little bit about some of the film, especially the let's just say the tired and played out white savior trope that we get inundated with, that gets celebrated. And then also how it shows up in the materials that we consume, the curriculum that we use. And even for presenters, I shared that I always see it all the time where the presenters are not mindful of the representations on their slides as well. So it was good stuff. I loved working with both of my groups. I wish we had all day to work together.
Beautiful.
I love it. I just want to point out that's a lot of dopeness all four of y'all shared already, and this is just the intro. A lot of dopeness there, a lot of dopeness there. And although this is a very affirming space and everybody's welcome, we'll tolerate the Go Bears, but officially this is a UCLA space right here. We go Bruins around here, just so y'all know. Just so y'all know.
I'm the host here,
clear.
and I can mute everybody. I can do everybody. And I did not go to UCLA. Sorry. So don't let me pull out. Let me mute everybody.
A lot of bias up in this space, brother. A lot of bias.
We're not even gonna bring in the fear of the tree in that, but we'll let y'all think.
Okay, appreciate it. So let's start with, earlier during this Q&A, we asked about, returning back to school this fall after pandemic and all of that. And just going a little deeper with that, we saw that across the nation as more school systems started to transition to hybrid or more in-person learning, we saw that disproportionately Black families, Asian American families, Latinx families, Indigenous families were opting to stay in their virtual learning environment. For a host of reasons, which, we could definitely get into, but we're wondering, looking forward to the fall, what do we need to do, or what do schools and teachers and school systems need to do to welcome those families back to in-person experience that does right by them? And we'll start with Ken, Mr. Bruin, we'll go there first, reporting live from, looks like Four Seasons Landscaping, I believe.
Yes,
you caught that too.
Yeah. So
yeah, good. Yeah, everyone in my session, I changed my background. Yeah. So yeah, this is Four Seasons Landscaping. I'm in Philly. So Matt, you and I, we need to go chop it up a little bit at a Starbucks. Just kidding.
Nancy and I will be at the Waffle House. You can meet us at the Waffle House when you
Yeah, exactly, for 24 straight hours. Manuel, thank you. By the way, go Bruins. Okay, so to answer your question, look, I've got so many stories, and for time's sake, I will just say I don't. There's a reason, and no one's asking the right question. And when I say that, they're like, well, first of all, going back to what you shared, and I forgot to mention this in my sessions, is the whole idea around digital redlining. Did you all notice how many Black, really, let's just put it this way, how many marginalized families based on geography, socioeconomic status, or racial identity either don't have internet access, don't have broadband access, or were given hotspots to be able to connect to their learning? And how often you saw people bring up, well, gee, I didn't know all these inequities were here. No, we've been talking about it for a while. You just late hearing it. So with that being said, I think the right question is, first, why are the families not opting to go back to the school? I know for me, why would you choose to go back to a situation that was already traumatizing you? And so what's not happening is there's not an examination on what are the policies that are in place and what are the practices of the people that lead to a decision of, I'm not going back. So to welcome them back, I think there needs to be definitive statements by district leadership. I know, and I appreciate all the panelists here, but I do have to share a little bit that there's only so much that we can do, and it's precisely why I always ask and encourage educators to start to interrogate different pedagogical practices, because in the end, you still have to color in the lines, and that's why I put in the chat, for all of you on here that are educators, run for the union officer positions and run for the school board. Because if you want to really make sustainable systemic change, it's at the policy level. And so to answer your question, basically, to me, it should be definitive statements around supporting the social and emotional well-being of the kids and the families, and doing it in a way where you have space for access to resources, and even, again, at the policy level, this is my last thing, is like, even when I work with school district, I look at it and I ask them, do you have an anti-plagiarism policy? Oh yeah, we have, there's like 3 or 4 pages. Do you have an anti-racism policy then? And sadly, more often than not, the answer is no.
All right, who'd like to jump in? So thinking about the disproportionate trends that we saw with families, what families opted to go back to in-person and which families opted to stay home. Matthew, what you got?
Well, what this reminds me of is the conversation about why there's so often so few teachers of color. It seems connected to me. Like, a lot of times we focus, for instance, on like, well, we need to make more money. That is true. That is true. And the spaces need to be more welcoming. That is true. But a lot of times what's missing from the conversation is how much, when a lot of us were kids, school sucked. We didn't like it. And so school is something we escape. And so if you take a kid who like, and you try to convince them to go back for a life of it, they say, no way. Why would I ever do that? Unless you're like mission centered, but unless that's your driving force, and that might be us, and that makes us special. But generally, like, it's hard to convince in numbers that would make a massive difference teachers to opt back into the life, because kids to opt back into the life as adults because they did not like school, right? They just not like it. So they don't see, and I think that's related to this. Like, I didn't like it. So if I have an option to not go, I'm not going. Like, that's not and I think some things are really complex and some things are also super simple. It's like, before I did not have the option to not go. Now I have the option to not go. So I'm not going to go because I don't find joy in it, because it's not challenging to me, because it's too challenging to me for some reasons, because I don't feel supported, because I don't feel, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same thing we saw with kids and cameras, and caused us a lot of frustration when we were on Zoom. All of a sudden, this kid turn off their camera and they're hiding because they can. They can't turn off their camera and hide when they're present. But because they're home, they can turn off their camera because they have more power in that situation. They can say, I don't care what you say, my camera's off. I don't care what you say. And that really frustrated us because it really laid bare how disinterested some of these kids can be in what we've set up as school. Because like, they can fake it till they make it if they're in. Like, if they're in there, it's different. But if they're home and they can turn their camera off, you really got to, what can you do about it? And I think that might be a part of what we saw. Like, it's the same kind of spirit that leads to to the numbers of, teachers who choose not to get, the amount of potential teachers who choose not to sign up for that life because their kid experience, they just straight up didn't like school. It wasn't fun. There was it wasn't inquiry based. It wasn't project based. There was no creativity. It was just drill and kill, and they didn't like it. And that's what school means. So they want to do something else. It's the same thing. Now kids had some power. They want to go back. I think it's kind of,
Well, listen, I don't know where y'all learned to teach. I learned to teach in the South Bronx. Kids wasn't faking nothing. So I don't know how they do them in Philly. I did work in Philly for a little bit, but in the South Bronx, these jokers, and I was 21 fresh out the gate, these jokers were like, excuse me, ma'am? No, not even ma'am. I got called lots of other things. But anyway, I say all that to say, what I hear from both of y'all is that an acknowledgement that schools are toxic and traumatic environments. I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was 5. And then I realized I can't hold my pee all day. So I guess I can't be a teacher because I never saw my teachers go to the bathroom, right? And so just think about how dehumanizing we set schools up to be for all the humans who have to be in that space. So I say all that to say that, yes, there are some clear structural things we can do. So, my healing work is my side hustle. I'm Jamaican, I got 12 jobs, right? So my other work is I work with school systems across the country to create high quality performance assessment systems. I have been I won't say one of the few, there's been lots of Black folks, but I have never been about standardized testing. As a school administrator, I'm just not. It just doesn't, it's never sat right in my being. And so I'm going to bring it back to another reason why people are not signing up, including teachers, to come back into those toxic environments. We've had a couple of years of being able to dwell and marinate and to do things that are humanizing for us. And we've gotten adjusted to our energy. We've gotten adjusted to being able to go to the bathroom when you want to being able to eat when your stomach is caught, right? And we've been really cool in some spaces. If Zoom, people, when I run meetings virtually, I allow people to be present. If the baby crying, go tend to the baby. Like, man, this is don't focus on this right here, what's happening on the Brady Bunch screen, right? And we have to think about what I would say, and it's really disheartening to see that we're not using this opportunity to really bust up some of these structures. Like Matthew mentioned it, right? What's happening listen, I never taught in a classroom for less than 65 minutes. I had these jokers for 2 hours. you can't speak for 2 hours. You better get some PBL. You better get some collaborative learning. And I'm not talking about, I also taught in the South Bronx where we had all the gangs. We didn't have a dress code. We didn't have the metal detector. So guess what? Collaborative learning became the way that you actually, can I curse on this? Can you tell me? You don't F up the person that's in your group. I literally heard kids be like, yo, we got a project in Alcine's class. We can't F him up this weekend, okay? Because it's a group project and we gotta work together and we gotta get a grade. So I ask us to think about and centering what we have experienced. What are the humanizing ways we can come back together, right? Yeah, the kids had power to turn off their Zoom boxes, but they still do that when they put their heads on. Listen, let me tell y'all something. Graffiti is a sign of disengagement. When kids are graffitiing on the desks, my babies in Oakland, they graffitied in chalk, bless their souls, right? They weren't even that gangster. But the bottom line is that when kids are disengaged, right? They're disengaged before they stop coming to the building. We just don't notice. So we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention. And I would invite us to, the way you can start to pay attention to others is to deeply pay attention to yourself. Because what I'm noticing in my body is I got a family function to go to tomorrow and I'm anxious being around the room with more than 5 people. I gotta wrestle with that. So some of the babies are anxious about coming back to school. We put them back in, 32 kids in a class. What happened to the 6 feet? And we're not grappling. We're not even dealing with the anxiety that's coming up for some people. So I'm gonna kick it to Essien.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And I think just gonna flat out say it. Public schools is designed to fail our children, period. All this pushback, like had the data, we knew the data before No Child Left Behind. We've had the data since No Child Left Behind, and we know about the opportunity gap. You explain to me why since 2001, 2002, with all the minds we got, we have not closed the opportunity gap. You have people who are actively fighting against things that are going to be beneficial for Black and brown kids. So public education is not designed so that our children who are segregated, who go to segregated schools, so they can get this great learning and then go off. That's why people are fighting against ethnic studies. Well, your kid don't have to study ethnic studies. You can opt out. You can do whatever you want. Why are you fighting against ethnic studies? Because it wasn't designed to empower the Black and brown kids. So here's what I'm saying, public education, recognizing that it's a failure, it's designed to fail our kids. How do we, in the spaces that we move in, because I'm in public education, how do we use our power to flip the script? And so I'm going to drop something here, community schooling. Community schooling is a community school strategy has to become the way we just do school, period. It changes the dynamic. So at my school site, instead of my school being seen as this entity that sits in the neighborhood, where the neighborhood has to send their kids to get validated on whether they're going to have a future or not, right? It becomes a validation place. And so then what are we validating? How you conform to what we say is correct. And it varies from school to school. So with the community school strategies model, we say to hell with that, throw that out the window. Any school that's in a community anywhere, it's situated to be a resource for the community. It's not about validating kids. You don't have to validate the child. The fact that the child exists and running around, that's validation enough. How do we then begin to meet the needs of the families that the school is serving, right? That's a different relationship. So with community schooling, we can do a needs assessment where we can find out if we have issues around food, but then who do we partner with? What agencies do we partner with so that we can address the food issue? Not just on the day for the food bank, right? Do we need to raise money and give gift cards for our families, right? If we have violence issues, do we have access to agencies that can provide mentorship or that can provide counseling, right? If we're trying to do project-based learning and my teachers don't know how to do PBL, they don't know how to do that, can I go partner with Disney to come in and teach my teachers how to teach animation so that my kids can have this empowered learning environment? What I'm going to say right now is people everywhere, I don't care where you are, I don't care what city you're in, what district you're in, what state you're in, you need to be advocating for the community school strategy. Here in the state of California, the state superintendent this past year allocated $300 million for this community school strategy. UTLA won some concessions in their strike. My community school coordinator and I are working with LA Unified to think about how to implement and roll out this community school strategy. People need to fight for that. And our governor in California is thinking about putting $3 billion towards that. If we go to community schooling, the relationship between the student, the family, and the communities we serve is different. It's not about how we think of things. We tend to think of things around students. When a student is enrolled in my school, I have a family enrolled in my school. If that kid is not eating at home and he comes into my classroom, food is an issue now in my math, science, ELA class. If that kid, if they're couch surfing because there's a housing issue, we need to be able to address that. What agencies do I need to pull in to talk to the families to get some secure housing? We have to change how we think about schooling, and that is through the community school strategy. We need to advocate for that. And in the middle of that, then you need to do my anti-racist discipline. You need to do the Alcine, the healing, right? We need to actually do, then we need to do all those other things, right? So that's my response to that.
So much shared there that you got my gears turning around, all of you. I think for our final question, I actually want to dig a little bit deeper on this issue because something I wrestle with as someone who has a background as a middle and high school principal, and I now work with a network of schools within LAUSD. I think it's a fair statement to say that principals, APs, teachers in our school systems, the one thing they don't have enough of right now is time, right? Time to do all of the work that we are just naming. And in a world where we are saying everything that was just said, right? Like these are the things we need to prioritize. These are the ways we need to live our values in our work. What do you all think we need to stop doing or cut back on to create the time to prioritize student well-being, relationships, social emotional learning, project-based learning, right? The things that we have just said are what is important in our profession. So
actually, Jeff, we're gonna, Joe would like to, we're gonna have a raffle in a moment and wrap things up in a moment. So we're gonna answer that question. We're gonna have each of you leave us with your one thought or your one idea about, in terms of what Jeff just asked about, what's something we need to pull back from in order to make space for things that are actually healing and affirming for our students. So we're gonna have you each share one thought on that. I'm going to drop for everybody in the audience. Again, these are the type of conversations we have on our show, All the Above. So I'm gonna drop our links. We would love your support with that. And in a moment, Joe is gonna raffle off one of our shirts, not one of the ones we're actually wearing, but a shirt like this, of this design. So stay tuned for that. All right, so who would like to go first with your one?
And let's do this. Let's do a stop and a start, okay? Okay. Keep it short, okay, y'all? What do we stop doing? What do we start doing? And then I'm gonna hit the raffle and then we'll close this up with some Curtis Mayfield. Who's up first? Stop and start. What are we doing?
I can start. I think we need to stop going for the football, Charlie Brown. We have to stop chasing these things that people, I'm gonna bring in Mama Janet, my mom, who's an ancestor right now. You know, we had one tantrum in our family. She had 3 children and she looked and she stepped over my brother because she wasn't dealing with the foolishness. Stop giving our energy to things that are not worthy of our energy and our time. Start to focus on the families and communities that we serve. When we focus on their needs, and I'm not talking about from a middle class, Black excellence, elitist gaze. I said that because we can sometimes think and we perpetuate some stuff in that way. But when we sit side by side with the families and you hear their hopes and dreams for their children, that should light a fire under your behind to work and grind to make that happen. They are their family's best gifts. They're not keeping the good kids in the basement, right? So let's start focusing on what our families need and stop chasing what these white supremacist racists keep trying to throw in our paths as obstacles.
I'd say I don't have a stop. My start. I'll just save time on my start. Get back to mentoring teachers, not holding teachers in compliance, not just mentoring them. Like authentic feedback on unit plans, authentic feedback on lesson plans, creating structures that help develop teachers. I say stop anything that gets in the way of that, like anything, because I think that is that's the lead job. And unfortunately with administrators, it's not allowed to be the lead job. But we have situations where we require teachers to hand in bi-weekly lesson plans and they don't get feedback on them. All right, so we got situations where we ask teachers to do this, that, and a third, but they don't get anything back. And nationwide, no matter what school I talk to, rural, suburban, Catholic, private, everyone is doing the same nonsense where the teachers aren't getting feedback. And so if you can't do it, fine. Set up some sort of system where teachers can get the feedback so we can be better and develop at our craft. And anything that's not that, sideline it. Like that you gotta prep these we have to feel supported and not just held accountable. That's my biggest thing.
I would say stop being afraid, right? More times than not, we talk about all these things and it's like, oh, it's so helpless. Oh, the system this, the system that. I remember when I was becoming the principal, I asked a question like, oh, so when I become the principal, are you going to support me in my changes? And my assistant superintendent said, yeah. I was like, okay, cool. I became the principal and boom, changed the bell schedule, changed the project-based learning. Changed we got rid of the detention center, create the 6th grade corridor. We're separating the 6th grade. Why? Because I can. Stop asking for permission. Do stuff, right? And the reason you need to do this is because we're child advocates. Like we only tend to think about if we catch a parent whipping on the child, beating on the child with bruises, then I need to call CPS. What the heck are you going to do when you see adults in the building interacting inappropriately with children? And I'm not talking about inappropriate in terms of touch. I'm talking about, the way you talked to that kid was wrong. You are a child advocate, intervene. And sometimes you need to intervene as the principal of the school. I need to be able to accept somebody telling me, hey, SN, I'm a child advocate right now, bro. You need to stop doing what you're doing. We also need to be able to accept feedback, all right? Stop being afraid, do stuff. Our kids need us to step up.
I guess I'm last. First of all, thank you all for being here. Joe, thank you. And I guess for me, honestly, my simple thing to encouragement to all of you is twofold. And I'm not being performative when I say really engage in self-care. I brought it up in my sessions. It's critical. A lot of what we do, and that's why I put it in the chat, our value is based upon how productive we are and how much time we are, quote unquote, productive. If you'll notice that education doesn't reward efficiency. And many of us probably, I used to do it. Think about it. If you have a student in class and they finish their work early, what was our default until we unlearned it? We give them more work. And so for me, it's to be able to push back against the whole notion. It's a capitalistic structure, the whole notion that your only value is your labor and your labor is only valuable if you're using all the time of your contracted hours to do it. And I think if we start looking at rewarding, especially if you're a site leader, if you start looking at rewarding efficiency by allowing space for self-care, for, as Matthew put, I think some cases you do have schools, and even Michael mentioned it, some cases you have schools where the best mentors for the school are literally at the school. So if I have extra time, it's how do I build a coalition of community at the school to not only uplift all of the adults in the building, but by default have that permeate the culture to uplift all of the students. And that doesn't mean that I have to take your time for a meaningless faculty meeting. It doesn't mean that you have to use your conference period for grading papers. It doesn't mean that if you have an idea that's going to support the school, which happened to me for most of my career was, oh, that's a good idea, but you have to do it after school. You have to find the grants. You have to like we want to reward ways in which it will uplift the community of the school. And and again, looking at the value of your time, and it's like, there's a reason why, for example, and they're praised for it, but it's a whole different thing for me to bring up. There's a reason why Google is praised for encouraging their employees to use what's called 20% time. 20% of their time on the job is devoted to a pet project. So while I recognize that it's not as simplistic as that, my main point is what would happen if we were encouraged to use part of our day, which by default, there is a day, part of that day, to say, what can I do to support my colleagues, support myself, and support the school as a whole community with that time, rather than spending time at the copy machine or doing all the other stuff that really doesn't translate to shifting the culture of the school or of the district. So hopefully I was brief, Joe, but I really want to stress that it's a privilege to be able to spend this time with you all, to see all the beautiful faces here. And for those of you that were in my sessions, thank you for sharing the brave space with me. And for those of you that didn't make it, I'm glad that you all were just here. I think just being here, showing up is the first part of the battle.
All right, y'all. Please thank our last round here and our workshop presenters in general. Show them some love. Please thank Manuel and Jeff for their hosting and their great questions. Definitely check out their show as well. We're gonna do a raffle and close it out. All right, y'all. Let's bring on some Curtis Mayfield. And let's close it out. And, y'all. All right, let's see who the winner is. How many shirts we got, Jeff and Manuel? Be generous, be generous.
We got 5 to give away, Joe. We got 5 to give away.
Okay, that's more generous than I think. Okay, all right. We got 5 shirts. We're gonna do fast. Let's see what we got first.
We can make it 2 if you want.
Let's do 2. Let's do 2 so we can get people on their way. All right, I'm cool. You got that for me, Mike?
You know, I got you, Joe. I got you.
All right, sir. Maybe we'll do 3. We got some time. All right, and this is, why don't you show us what the shirt looks like, Manuel, so they know what you're getting?
Oh, Jeff got it too. There
you go, boom.
Yeah, we dropped the link in the chat, I believe.
That's right. Teach the truth, folks.
All right. Last shirt. Monique Walton. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for your participation. Last minute logistics show again. Check your email. You're gonna get everything via email, okay? Final surveys, certificates, reminders, links, resources, all of that. I will make sure you get contact information for all the presenters, all the workshop leaders, the facilitators, keynote speakers. We'll get everything to you in one place. We'll close out with some love for our facilitators. Take nothing less. Love for our presenters. Than the supreme best. Do not obey.
Shout out to Joe. Love for Joe. Man, let Joe know how much you appreciate the work he's done, the hard work he's done to put this together and bring us all together this week, man. This is super dope.
Thank you so much. We'll close. We'll see you next June. Ask your parents if you can come back to summer camp. If they'll let you. Ask if they'll let you get on the bus, pack a sleeping bag. Maybe it'll be in person. You might ask a sleeping bag. You never know. But take care of yourself. I think it's Friday somewhere. I think so. A long week. I don't know what day it is. But enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your summers. As Ken said, let's make sure we practice some self-care now that we got busy for a week. We don't got to get busy all summer. We can recharge because the children need us on the other side of the summer. Let's rest up. Take care of yourself. I'll drop some links in the chat if you get a couple of things. And peace out, y'all. Take care.
People are asking whether we dancing it out, Joe.
Are we dancing or what are we dancing to?
I can dance to anything, so let's go.
We'll keep Curtis Mayfield on. We can't lose.
Let's do it.
All right, is that coming through?
Yep.
Not to miss it. Realize I'm still screaming. Let me cut the screen before we start